June Wilder was just the radio technician, the one people forgot until the machine stopped working, the cables fried, or the static hissed where orders should have been. But on that rainy afternoon deep inside the base's main operations bunker, surrounded by steel walls, blinking panels, and men in uniform staring at her like she didn't belong, everything changed because she was down on one knee beside a smoking console, her hands deep inside fried circuits and black wires trying to fix the comm system that had gone dark 20 minutes before a SEAL mission. And when she stood up to test the system one last time, the room fell silent. Not because the machine worked, but because the SEAL captain, the most respected man in the room, had suddenly stood at attention and raised his hand in a salute, not to a flag, not to a general, but to her, the woman they all called Cable Girl behind her back, the girl in grease-stained pants and rolled-up sleeves. And every man in the room froze like the air had thickened, like someone had shouted, "Incoming," but no one could see the blast. And June, still holding the testing headset, looked up in confusion, unsure why Captain Rourke's eyes were locked on hers, why his hand was raised in rigid respect, and why nobody else dared to speak, until the silence cracked under the weight of truth when Rourke finally said, in a voice low but firm, "She saved my team's life." And suddenly the room wasn't just quiet. It was stunned, confused, shaken to its roots, because no one knew that part of the story. No one had ever heard anything like that about the quiet woman who fixed their broken equipment and walked out before they even noticed she was there. And now, suddenly, everyone wanted to know who she really was. And the answer didn't come from her, because June didn't speak. Not yet, not while memories of a different time, a different desert, and a different night were still flashing like lightning behind her eyes. Because 8 years ago in Afghanistan, before she joined this base, before she was even officially part of the military, she had been working as a civilian contractor, an off-the-books comms specialist brought in to help on short-term missions. And one night she'd been left behind at an outpost, told to pack the gear and wait for evac, while SEAL Team 6 rolled out to a classified location. But that convoy had been hit by a triple-stacked IED, and the radio tower at the outpost had failed just minutes before the ambush. And in the chaos, the only person left who could fix the signal and get a rescue mission in the air was her. A 24-year-old woman sitting alone on a sandbagged rooftop with a broken transmitter and nothing but a flashlight, duct tape, and her mind full of frequencies. And she had worked faster than she ever had in her life, cutting wires with her teeth, rerouting power, rebuilding a signal relay with bare hands under fire, until the signal came back to life and she used the emergency bandwidth to send coordinates to the command center. Coordinates that saved 7 men, including Rourke, who had crawled from the wreckage and heard the voice over the comms guiding the bird in. Calm, clear, female, and unforgettable. But afterward, no one gave her a medal. No one mentioned her in the reports, because her name wasn't on the mission list. And all she got was a pat on the back from an officer who told her, "Nice work, Cable Girl," before putting her on the next flight home. And so she went back to quiet jobs, back to hiding her brilliance behind tools and schematics. Until now, 8 years later, that same man, Captain Rourke, had found her again, and this time he refused to let the truth stay buried. And when the junior officers began to murmur, unsure whether to laugh or salute too, Rourke turned to them, his voice rising with anger and pride. "You all owe your lives to the woman you've ignored." And he pointed to the panel she had just fixed, the one that was now pulsing green with the signal that would guide an entire battalion home. And he said, if she hadn't repaired that system in under 5 minutes, our recon team would be flying blind over enemy terrain. Again. And now the whispers stopped. Now the glances dropped. And June looked around, her face flushed, not with shame but with the weight of memories she never asked to carry. And before anyone else could speak, a man in the back of the room stood, Master Chief Grant, the oldest operator in the room, a man who barely moved anymore because of the shrapnel in his spine. And he walked forward with a cane, his boots thudding softly, and stood in front of June, looked her dead in the eye and said, "Thank you for not letting us die in the dark." And then he raised his hand and saluted too, and the air shifted, like something had cracked open inside the room, something heavy and long ignored, and one by one, the men began to stand, some embarrassed, some stunned, some ashamed they hadn't seen her until now. But all of them stood, and all of them saluted, and June just stood there, silent, eyes wide, heart racing, not because she needed their respect, but because she had finally been seen, finally been remembered not for her silence, but for her action. For the fire she ran into, not away from, and Rourke stepped closer and pulled something from his chest pocket, a challenge coin, scratched and scuffed, with the seal of SEAL Team 6 on one side, and the words, "For Ghazni, for staying," on the other, and he placed it in her hand and whispered, "This belonged to the medic who didn't make it out. He wanted you to have it." And June closed her fist around it, not crying, not shaking, just still, like the storm inside her had gone quiet. And for the first time someone called her by her name and not her job, and someone else whispered from the side, "We've been saluting the wrong people," and it echoed through the steel room like a confession, like a vow. And later that night, when the mission succeeded and the base went back to its routines, June sat alone on the rooftop under the stars, holding the coin, her radio headset beside her, and she didn't feel alone anymore. Not because of the salutes or the stares, but because the silence had been broken, and in that moment, she knew that her story, the real one, had finally begun to be told, not by her, but by the men who once thought she was invisible.